So I wanted to brief you on the status of the reforms of the African Union, which, as you know, are championed by His Excellency Paul Kagame, President of Rwanda, on the request of his peers and colleagues. The series of reforms have been ongoing for some time. They began with reforming the vision, mission of the African Union to focus it on programs and of a continental nature. And then from the 17th to the 18th of November, there were a series of reforms aimed at making the African Union Commission fit for purpose to serve that agenda, that reformed agenda. And those reforms agreed included reforming the Commission itself, making sure that the Commission is reduced from the current 10 members. Currently it's 10 members, including 1 president, 1 vice president, and 8 commissioners, to a commission of 8 members, so making it leaner. 8 members, including 1 president, 1 vice chairperson, and 6 commissioners. The reforms also introduced a reconfiguration of the portfolios of the commissioners and included new departments to help us dealing with the challenges of tomorrow. Those include the blue economy, rural development, and natural resources, especially mining. So the commission was both reduced in number, rationalized, but also made fit for purpose for the challenges of tomorrow. There were reforms agreed on how these commissioners and the presidents will be selected. For the president and the vice president, the selection process, and the commissioners, the selection process will begin with regions, the 5 regions of the African Union, proposing candidates, making sure that there is gender equality, parity, but also making sure that there is regional, intra-regional rotation based on an alphabetical order. Those proposals will then be submitted to a panel of eminent persons for consideration. The eminent persons will include former presidents and other former heads of government, former leaders of continental organization, including the African Union Commission, former ministers of foreign affairs, and so on. So there will be a panel of eminent persons which will consider those proposals. That panel will be assisted by an independent African firm. So an independent African firm that will be recruited by the panel of eminent persons to examine these proposed names for consideration. The people shortlisted for the African Union chairperson and vice chairperson will then have a chance to speak to Africans in general. There will be televised debates across the African continent for them to share what their vision for Africa is, what they intend to do. And then they will also go to the assembly of heads of state, who are the ones who make the final choice. But these people will be given a chance to also express their vision and mission, how they want to do to the assembly of heads of state. So that will be for the chairperson and the vice chairperson. The commissioners will also be selected by their regions, go through the process of endorsement by the panel of eminent persons, assisted by the firm, an independent African firm, but they will be selected by the Executive Council, which is composed of ministers of foreign affairs, by delegation from the heads of state. So that mode of selection was agreed, but the reforms also introduced a way for termination of non-performing officials, because right now there's no clear procedure as how to terminate somebody who is not performing. And it was agreed that the procedure for termination will begin with at least 4 member states, coming from regions, except for the region which does not have its national as either the chairperson or the vice chairperson or the commissioner. So those member states can begin termination proceedings based on incompetence, gross incompetence, or some other things, and the termination will have to be accepted by the heads of state for the chairperson and vice chairperson. The chairperson of the commission can also initiate termination procedures for commissioners under him or her, which is a new procedure. And this will go through, again, it will have to go through the Executive Council, who can then pronounce themselves on this matter. So the reforms included both the modes of selection and the modes of termination of elected officials. In addition to these reforms of the Commission, these reforms, of course, as you may understand, will begin with 2021, so they do not apply to the current Commission of the African Union. But in addition to this, there were a number of reforms introduced that lead to a better functioning of the current Commission. Those include reforms within the financing and human resource management of the Commission itself, as well as any other reforms that may come before the summit later on. So there are a number of reforms that affect the current Commission. I won't go into the details of all these reforms. Another critical component of the reform agenda, as you know, is the financing of our union. And on the margins of this summit, there was a launch of the AU Peace Fund. The AU Peace Fund is aimed at financing activities, peacekeeping activities of the African Union, and it was launched a long time ago. It was launched in 2013, but it has not really been active. And through the work of the African Union Summit, the Commission, assisted by Special Envoy on AU Financing, Dr. Donald Kaluka, there's been a momentum now, which culminated in the launch of the AU Peace Fund. The fund currently has about $60.5 million contributions from member states, and is expected to reach about $100 million by February 2014. That's possible, so this was historic. But in addition to the AU Peace Fund, the summit also agreed on a new sanctions regime for member states that do not meet their obligations on time. And so a new sanctions regime was agreed and will begin to take effect, so that people actually deliver on their commitments, and if they don't, there are consequences for that non-delivery. The reforms not only included the Commission and financing, they also included a number of other organs. So then NEPAD, which is a development agency, was turned into the African Union Development Agency, a new with a clear mandate for leading the development of Africa. This was an important reform. There will be more work done on internal structuring of this agency, but this was agreed that if Africa needs one agency that leads her development agenda, and so this African Development Agency was agreed. And finally, the African peer review mechanism, which is a mechanism that examines governance on our continent and reports to all of us about how we are doing, either doing well or doing badly. This mechanism was fully mainstreamed into the African Union, including into its budget. So member states will fund this agency, this mechanism, and hopefully all countries will join it. And this mechanism will be providing the State of Africa governance report on a yearly basis. There were other discussions held about how we hold discussions with our European partners, but that in general were the reforms agreed at the last summit. The reform process continues. There's still some work that needs to be done on other organs of the Commission, including the Parliament, the Court, Justice, human rights bodies, and other agencies. So that's a work in progress. But this was an important step on our reform journey.